Welcome to this episode of Legal Angle with Emmanuel Halawale. I have with me today a friend and also an immigration attorney based in Texas. He's going to be educating us today about the National Interest Waiver. He's one of the coolest attorney that I know. Welcome to the
Thank
show,
you.
Leo.
Thank you, Emmanuel, and thank you for having me. It's great to be here. And hopefully we can inform and talk a little bit about this very interesting green card category that not a lot of people know about and get to know each other a bit more.
Thank you. Can you introduce yourself in your own words?
Absolutely. So I am a Venezuelan and American attorney. I was born in Venezuela. I came to the US about 10 years ago, got my master's. I worked at one of the biggest law firms in the world, a little under 5 years. Came, got my master's, thought I'd be going back to Venezuela where I'm from, but um, it was getting really, really bad. And I just gotten married and so I found that if I could find a way to work in the United States for a while, that'd be great. My initial thought when I started doing my master's in the US was that it was going to be really easy to find a job and find someone to sponsor me, but that was definitely not the case. It was harder than I thought. So I worked hard. As you know, most immigrants are hard workers. I worked hard, got to know fellow attorneys, worked at a consulting firm for a little while, and found this niche area of law. And from that, we built, Adriana and I, my partner, who you know, we built this practice based on a strategy, which in the strategy is basically just trying to know our clients a little bit better, trying to work a little bit harder than everyone else, and trying to find the right details to prove how a determined person or company bringing in foreign workers can bring value to the United States. I come from a family of attorneys, and I love what I do.
Thank you. And what was it like growing up in Venezuela?
Well, um, I loved growing up in Venezuela. I I had a privileged childhood. Um, Growing up in Venezuela, we have a very tight knit communities, very supportive groups, and you know, I loved my home, but it was very uncertain, right? Growing up in that sort of country, and ever since I moved to the US and recently since I think we talked about this during our last outing in Atlanta. I figured, why was it that when it got really hard in the United States, I didn't go back to what, was a life of some comfort in Venezuela? And I think the answer is I didn't want to practice law in a lawless country. That was it. I really like being a lawyer and being in a country where the institutions work. Of course, the United States, like every other country, has its flaws, but you can see it how the institutions work. How when there's a mistake, someone points it out. And I remember what I did not like about growing up in Venezuela, and I remember this whenever we came on vacation to the U.S. My parents would be like, "Yeah, go outside, play on the street." Whereas back home, not so much, right? And I tell people, when I was kidnapped, it was like a rite of passage, right? It was just something that happened. It didn't really affect me, and maybe we can go into this a little bit later, but that was what I did not like, the uncertainty of not knowing how to get to a certain place, right? And you said something that really, you didn't see me in the video, but during your presentation to Legal Angle, I was nodding along because I truly believe that in this country, if you work hard, a little bit of luck, you can achieve anything,
Yes,
anything.
yes. Hey, you mentioned something. You said you didn't want to practice law in a lawless country, because you are also a victim of that lawlessness. You were kidnapped at some point because of your privilege.
Yeah,
Do you want to tell us about that experience?
right. So I was participating as a coach for a Model United Nations, and it was late at night, not very late. Like we left the meetings at around 10 o'clock, and I was the one correcting the briefs because I've always liked writing. No wonder I became a lawyer. So I was coming back to my house in Venezuela, and there was a hospital nearby, and this car is flashing the lights at me, and I figure oh, this must be a pregnant lady going to the hospital. It wasn't. It wasn't. So this car blocked me up. Five guys come in, AKs, machine guns, and they tell me, get out of the car. And my thought, as soon as I was kidnapped, it wasn't. I didn't. I don't know why, but I didn't panic. I didn't panic. Of course I was scared, but my first thought was just my mic was muted. Let me just sorry. My first thought during that was, listen, it's your turn. Look for a way out. So I was very precise with the information that I gave them. I always tell people that one of my biggest accomplishments as a negotiator, an attorney, was negotiating myself out of that kidnapping without my parents having to pay a ransom.
Hmm.
But I was driven around for about 4 or 5 hours with a gun to my head, and people the kidnappers asking a lot of questions, a lot of very personal questions, and I just tried to be very precise with the details I gave them. Of course, uh, I lied a lot, but I was very precise with what I lied about. I knew certain areas of because of I was already working as an attorney. I knew a lot of the areas of the city that weren't safe. I knew them quite well, so I could tell them, like, where I lived, and how I bought my car, and where I worked. And I told them I didn't work where I worked because I was working at one of the biggest law firms in the world. So that would probably have led to them asking for a ransom. But one of the funny stories is I had one of these Casio calculator watches, and I was wearing jeans and a t-shirt. And my dad, who's a very serious guy, very formal, he's like, Diego, you are about to graduate as an attorney. You cannot leave the house dressed like that. I'm like, Dad, come on, man. I'm young. And the Casio watch and the way I was dressed after 4 or 5 hours driving me around, the kidnappers are like, let this guy go, look at his watch. He's got nothing. And I was very lucky as well, because I had my BlackBerry. I had forgotten the charger for the BlackBerry. And the last conversation I'd had with someone on the BlackBerry was with like the CEO of a major media company who's a friend of the family. And, they would have seen that. They probably would have asked for ransom. But, I was lucky and very calm. But it was a breaking point, right? Because after that, although, I got home, I was safe, that's when I really started, that bug of maybe this isn't the right place to build a family or build a future. And that goes back to that uncertainty. I need a certain degree of certainty in my life. And I remember always my brother-in-law said, the only thing, he lives in Houston as well. The only thing I have to worry about in the United States is working. That's the only thing I have to worry about,
Yeah.
compared to the worries of Venezuela. There I'm walking down the street. Doesn't matter which street, I have to worry about being shot and killed.
Interesting.
I have to worry about being kidnapped. I can't wear a nice watch because I'll be kidnapped. I can't have nice things because
because they'll steal them. I go to the supermarket today. Bag of flour costs $1. Next week, cost 15, 1,000% inflation. That type of uncertainty will mess with your head.
And you moved to the United States. When you got here, you had to go back to law school to do your LLM. What was that like? The transition from Venezuela to the American system?
Oh, Emmanuel, that was spectacular. Spectacular, right? When in Venezuela, you go directly into law school. So you don't do a major or minor, just go directly into law school, and you have 5 years of law school, and classes are very much lectures, right? You get a lecture and then you memorize everything and you go take a tests all the time. And here, everything is Socratic method, right? So I found that when I started, reading everything before the class, and we had these assignments, going into class and really discussing things, that to me was really amazing. It was a gift. When I graduated from my LLM program, Emmanuel, I remember telling my parents, telling my wife, all I told them was, I wish I could study forever. I wish I could just read and read and read all the time and just discuss these things with his teachers who are, the authority in the field, the authority in energy economics in the US. And I talked to this guy, and the teachers they were never, most of them were never dismissive of the questions that we had or the opinions that we had. So that, going to school here, it really was eye-opening. It gave me a whole new idea of what the practice of law could be in this country. Wow. And it's a funny thing, because I remember my constitutional professor, she was very into civil rights and equality and all these things, and all things I'm for. But I remember at one point she started complaining about something, and I'm like, I raise my hand and I say, listen, Americans complain about the silliest things. You have all the safety in the world and you're complaining about silly things. And she told me something that has really stuck with me. She said, Diego, do you think we got to where we are by not complaining, or by complaining about the things that we see are wrong, finding ways to solve them? That just clicked. I'll never forget about that. That was like, oh, of course, you need to complain to fight for your rights.
You got
that was, yeah.
Wow. And what inspired you to start practicing immigration law?
Well, Emmanuel, if you would have told me 15 years ago I would have been practicing immigration law, I probably would have said, you're crazy. It can't be true. I really never thought about it. But today, I don't know if it was luck. I don't know if it was this sense of not doing what you love, but loving what you do, that my parents and my family instilled in me. If you're going to do something, do it right. That when I graduated from my LLM, I did my LLM in energy law. And when I finished my LLM, there was a huge oil price crash. Nobody in the energy field is hiring. And I started working with this consulting firm that provided support to outside attorneys. And in that time, my partner and I, who were both the consulting firm, we realized, like, well, there's this category called a national interest waiver that these attorneys don't seem to be really taking advantage of. So we spoke to one of the attorneys and we said, listen, I think you should be doing this. And, at one point she said, for one client, she said, okay, well, let's try and do it. And they did it and it worked. And from there on, we opened up the firm. We started doing a lot of national interest waivers, a lot of success. And the national interest waiver is just such a beautiful immigration category because, like I said earlier, I never would have thought I would be doing this, but I was born to do this. I was born to do this. I cannot imagine anything else in the world that would give me more satisfaction. Ever since I was like a kid, I remember when Wikipedia came out, I'd go into this Wikipedia vortex of just the most random things. It could be something from a Marvel universe. It could be something about science. And this is the beautiful thing about my work. I was really born to do this because I get to read on so many different things and their complexity every day. So this morning I can be trying to find how dancing and Arabic dancing can help women with their self-esteem, and working with a psychologist who's actually used dance, a psychologist who's also a dancer, dance as a means for therapy. And I get to read all about that, everything that's been done, and get to justify how this person's work is in the national interest. And then in the afternoon, I'm working with an engineer who's found ways to measure asphaltene levels in an oil well. And I get to read about why measuring asphaltene is important, or why doing these things about data science is important. So it's very, very interesting work, and it's very, very fulfilling.
Thank you. And what is National Interest Waiver?
All right. So what is the National Interest Waiver? So the American immigration system has two big categories. You've got the non-immigrant side of things, and then you've got the immigrant side of things. In the immigrant side of things, one of the four categories you have is the employment-based category, and the National Interest Waiver category is in the second preference of the employment-based category. So it's an EB-2 National Interest Waiver. What is it a waiver of? It is a waiver of a perm process, a labor certification. So usually when someone wants to get a green card, an employment-based green card in the United States, an employer has to sponsor that person. They need to go first, before going to immigration services, they need to go to the Department of Labor. And before going to the Department of Labor, they need to do this guided recruitment process where they publish for 30 days and then 30 days waiting to guarantee that that person, that foreign worker, is not displacing an American worker. So usually you need to guarantee that an individual is not displacing an American worker in order for him or her to get a green card in the employment-based category. What the National Interest Waiver does, what the law says is, in certain instances, the Attorney General can waive that labor certification if the person's work is in the national interest, right? Now, as you know, immigration law is thousands of pages, but they did not take the time to explain what they meant by national interest. So the national interest has evolved through time, through different decisions. And there are three decisions. If you want me, I can go into them. There are three relevant decisions for national interest waiver purposes. The two most relevant are NYS New York State Department of Transportation, 1998, and Dinosaur, which is the one which is the valid one right now, the one that's enforced, the one that guides all national interest waivers. Then there's Mississippi Phosphate for 1992, which explains what intrinsic merit means for national interest waiver purposes. So the decision that's in force right now, the one that's applied, it's called Dinosaur, for this professor at a university, I believe in North Carolina, a small regional university. He was doing research into propulsion systems. And what the decision says is that in order to qualify for a national interest waiver, you need to demonstrate three things. You need to demonstrate that your endeavor is of substantial merit and national importance. Then you need to demonstrate that you are well positioned to advance your proposed endeavor. And there are a whole lot of ways you can do that. And then you need to demonstrate that on balance, even if there were other qualified American workers, you would still benefit the United States to a greater degree than someone with the minimum qualifications. So the national interest waiver is all about proving your value to the United States. And a lot of times we've found, Emmanuel, a client will come with an extraordinary career and they don't really know what their value is. So it's our job to show them, listen, these are the results. I've looked at all the evidence you've sent me. These are the results of everything you've done in the United States or wherever you are, because you don't have to be in the United States to do this. You can be abroad and then come in. But this is the value. This is everything that you've done. This is the money that you've made these major companies, Microsoft, Shell, Schlumberger, Exxon, Chevron. You know, and it's our job to help them understand that they are in fact more qualified than someone with the minimum qualifications for a petroleum engineer or a software engineer.
Thank you. And who is eligible to apply?
All right. So first, to be able to apply for the EB-2 National Interest Waiver, for the National Interest Waiver, you need to demonstrate first that you are eligible for the EB-2 category. To be eligible for the EB-2 category, you need to demonstrate that you either have, that you qualify as an advanced degree professional. That is, you have either the equivalent of a U.S. master's or doctorate degree, or that you have the equivalent of a U.S. bachelor's degree plus 5 years of experience. So 5 years of experience count as a master's degree. Or you can demonstrate, if you don't have those degrees, that you have exceptional ability in the field. Exceptional ability is a lower standard than the EB-1A category of extraordinary ability. And what that means is that you satisfy 3 out of 6 requirements. What are those requirements? Let's say you have an associate's degree. So you need to prove that you have certificates or educational certificates in your area of expertise, that you have more than 10 years of experience in the field, that you are a member in professional associations, that you have earned a high salary in comparison to other qualified peers, and that you have been recognized for your accomplishments and significant contributions to the field. Usually, the way people prove exceptional ability, one of the easiest is, a degree, 10 years of experience, and membership in associations. And then you go into the National Interest Waiver category to demonstrate those 3 prongs of the Danaher test.
Thank you. So what that means is that a fresh graduate, regardless of how smart or how brilliant that they are, if they have no experience, they can't get a national interest waiver.
It's going to be very hard. So a recent graduate who can't demonstrate, doesn't have a record of demonstrable achievements, it would be very hard for them. Even if they're getting a doctorate and they just graduated from a doctorate, then it's different. But because there are certain specific evidentiary considerations for PhD graduates in STEM fields, right? That maybe someone graduating from a doctorate in a STEM field could potentially have a case. But in most other cases, you need to have the experience, right? Because when you are trying to demonstrate that you are well positioned to advance the proposed endeavor, it can't be speculative, right? And a lot of people will come to us, oh, well, but I published 2 papers while I was in my master's. Were those papers a requirement for graduating? Yes. Okay, then they don't count. I mean, we'll still include them if they were applied in the field, but immigration is rarely going to take those into account. So you need to have some sort of achievements that you can prove in industry or academic settings in order to be able to apply and get approved for a national interest waiver.
Thank you. Can a qualified person who is already in the US on a visitor's visa apply for it?
Absolutely. So if you are on a visitor visa, right, you have usually when you come in on a visitor visa, you got 180 days. So applying for the national interest waiver isn't necessarily applying for the adjustment of status. So you can apply for the national interest waiver, which is Form I-140, from abroad or from inside the United States. It's irrelevant, really. But if you came in on a visitor visa and you built a case in 90 days, then in day 91, you can apply for that adjustment of status concurrently because the law lets you change your intent. So the way immigration works is that when you come in on a non-immigrant visa, you're telling the government that your intent is in line with that visa. So if you're a visitor, your intent was as a visitor, but the law recognizes that we are human beings and our intent can change, right? So let's say you did an EB-1 case, which is similar to the national interest waiver. You did an EB-1 case, you submitted premium processing, it was approved in 15 days. And you say, well, I've been looking for houses for 80 days already. Maybe I can switch and do it in country. There's certain restrictions for people in visitor visas. So it's always important that, you consult with an immigration attorney, but it's, where you are or what status you're in the United States is irrelevant for purposes of applying for the national interest waiver.
Thank you. So you could apply for the national interest waiver without actually applying to adjust your status at the same time.
Exactly. So for example, for a lot of our clients who are abroad, they wait for their case to be approved, and then they go to consular processing abroad at the U.S. Embassy. A lot of our clients are already in the United States with L1 visas or L2 visas or H-1B visas, and they apply in country.
Yeah, thank you. So for those who are already in the US, do they need an employer to file the petition for them?
No, that's the wonderful thing about the national interest waiver. You file for yourself, by yourself. You are your self-sponsored, right? So you are basically sponsoring yourself based on a record of accomplishments that justifies a projection of future benefits to the nation. So you can have a plan, and immigration will understand that even if you have a plan, it could be the case that that plan does not succeed. So, but you need to have a plan. You need to have made progress in pushing that plan forward in order to, have a better case before an immigration officer. Remember, immigration officers are trained to start from no, right? You send them a case, they are starting from the point that you do not qualify, that you are not eligible. And it is our job to convince them that you are, in fact, eligible.
Thank you. And how are foreign degrees evaluated to determine if they qualify or if they meet the American standard?
Right. So the American Immigration Services uses a AACRAO EDGE system to measure whether a foreign degree is equivalent to a U.S. degree. So there are different organizations who provide academic equivalency evaluations who certify that that foreign degree is equivalent to a U.S. degree. And one of the interesting things here is that, at least for us, a lot of our clients who have master's degree in Europe, for example, let's say Spain, Ireland, UK, Italy, a lot of the master's degree are really specialty degrees. So they don't count as a master's because let's say it's only 20 credits and you need at least, I think it's 24 credits for it to count as a U.S. master's. So They can say they have 2 bachelor's degrees, but they can't say they have a master's degree. So in those cases, we use the experience, the work experience, to be able to qualify them for the EB-2 category.
Thank you. And you mentioned that you and your partner, came from Venezuela.
Yeah.
Can you tell us the story of how you decided to come together and form the practice?
Well, it's funny because Adriana and I, we went to kindergarten together. We went to law school together, and we hung out with the same groups, but never really tight friends. And then when we started working together at this consulting firm, it came to a point where, we said, listen, one of the attorneys we provided support for wanted to close her office. And as soon as we got our green cards, a little before we got our green cards, we started thinking about it independently, not talking amongst ourselves. Then when I got my green card, I opened up the law firm first. And then she got her green card about a year and a half after that. And then, I asked her, hey, you wanna partner up? And she did. And it's been a great ride. We're still learning a lot, and I guess that's the entrepreneurial way. You're always learning, always trying to get better and better and better and better every day. But it's really rewarding. And Adriana she's really good at the operations, and she's good at a lot of things, but she's really structured, and she helps us a lot with the structure. I love the popcorn ideas, and we're both very much like the popcorn ideas, and we'll fix our office and just fill it with Post-its like, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. And she is very good at saying, okay, well, we have 100 things. This is what we're going to focus on. So she's very good at that. And we have a very, very good balance in the way we do things, in the way we approach things. We're still getting the hang of our management roles and some of those overlapping things between partners, but she's awesome. She really does a lot for the firm, and I'm really glad that we started doing this together, because I also feel that she is committed. Like when we did this exercise called a vision day to see where the firm would go, the first thing she said, were like one of those good things that they do during this exercise. And the first thing she said, and I felt great that she said it, is the best thing about BBA Law Group partners is that we're on the same page. We are on the same page. We're trying to grow our business, and we're trying to help as many people as we can understand how the American immigration system works and how you can come here legally.
Yeah. Thank you. What an amazing story. You've known each other since kindergarten. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. What is the difference between EB-1 and EB-2?
All right. So the EB-2 category, unless you got a national interest waiver, you usually have to go to the perm. EB-1 is the first preference, and the first preference has 3 subcategories, right? You've got the EB-1A for extraordinary ability. You've got the EB-1B for certain distinguished professors and researchers. And then you've got the EB-1C for certain multinational managers or executives. A lot of our EB-2 national interest waiver clients will tell their friends they've got an extraordinary ability green card. And I keep telling them, you did not get an extraordinary ability green card. The EB-1A category is for individuals who can demonstrate, and this is the short explanation, individuals who can demonstrate that they are in the top 1% of their area of expertise in the world. In the world, not necessarily, maybe in their nation, right? So the top 1% of makeup artists in Nigeria, right? So the way you build EB-1A cases, though, and this is in the books, this is nothing new, you need to restrict the area of expertise as much as you can without restricting it too much. Because if I'm working with a petroleum engineer, I can't say you're in the top 1% of petroleum engineers, because then I'd have to compare you to every single petroleum engineer. Whereas I can say I am in the top 1% of drilling engineers specialized in directional drilling in these type of reservoirs, then that's a case. For the EB-1A case is in one sense, it's easier than a national interest waiver case, because the evidence for a national interest waiver case is not numbered. So you don't have a list of things that immigration says, listen, you need to tick all these boxes. Whereas with EB-1A, you need to either demonstrate that you've won an internationally recognized award, that is a Nobel, Oscar, Pulitzer, Grammy, Tony, BAFTA award, or, because not everyone has won one of those, you can demonstrate that you satisfy 3 out of 10 requirements. What are some of those requirements? Critical role for a distinguished organization. So when people hear this, they usually say, oh, I have to be the CEO of Microsoft. Not necessarily. You can be a data scientist who just started at Microsoft and found a bug in a system. Your role was critical, even if you were just a data scientist, because you did something that was critical to the company and the company is distinguished. That you have authored scholarly papers in scientific journals or major trade publications, that you're a member in associations that require outstanding achievements of their members. That's very important. So not just a member in professional associations, but professional associations that require outstanding achievements. That you have a high salary, that you've that there are publications that talk about you or your work, that you have judged the work of others in the field, that you have presented your work in artistic exhibitions or conferences. That's just some of them, but 3 out of 10, and then you need to demonstrate the potential benefit of your work. But usually once you demonstrate that you satisfy, you tick 3 out of those 10 boxes, you have more than a shoe-in for the EB-1.
Thank you. And how long does an application for a national interest waiver take?
Do you mean building a case or USCIS answering?
USCIS processing.
Okay, so right now, during the past years, up until now, they were taking 12, 14 months. 2022, we're starting to see cases be processed anywhere from 2 to 8 months, 2 to 10 months. Okay, it really depends on how much of a backlog the immigration services is starting to work a little bit better now that the pandemic is lighter over. I don't know what to say, but you know, they've gotten a lot better. They really, one of the things that we saw with the previous administration wasn't so much a lack of approvals for national interest waivers, but really just really long delays. And one of the things that we are seeing recently is that the cases that we sent in 2022, a lot of them have been answered already. But those that we sent maybe in January 2021, I don't know if they have like a stack of paper and they just kept it at the bottom, but still waiting.
How
Still
long does
waiting.
it take to build a case?
What's that?
How long does it take to build a case?
So usually building a case will take 4 to 6 months for national interest waivers. We've built cases faster, but the cases usually will take 4 to 6 months to build a solid case, just because of the amount of research that we have to do to demonstrate why an individual's work is in the national interest. We need to proofread and review reference letters for people who are signing reference letters for the individual applying. This is something that's very important for anyone wanting to apply for a national interest waiver. The reference letters are key, and the reference letters can't be a reference letter the way you usually think of a reference letter. It's not, you know, Emmanuel is very good, is very responsible, you know, he did great work. No, it has to be very technical, very detailed, right? So you need to make sure that you have language in there that mimics the language of decisions that have been published and approved, right? So that you have the right arguments. Because whenever we take a national interest waiver case, we are fairly, we're confident that there's a good case there, that it has a high likelihood of being approved. But, for national interest waiver cases, and for any immigration case, really, there's always going to be a factor of luck. Always. Because this is not a machine evaluating your case. This is a human being. Human beings make mistakes. Human beings are convinced or are not convinced. It's our job to do the research for it to be convinced. And I've had clients, I was actually telling someone in a meeting this morning, I've had clients tell me, oh, I spoke to this attorney. He told me he'll build my national interest waiver case in a month and a half. And I'm like, great. Go.
It's not going to work.
Go work with that. I'm sure you've had this happen to you in your practice. Sometimes people don't want to be helped. Sometimes, and you really have to have all the information. We have clients who, are both drilling engineers, are both at Chevron, both have 20 years of experience, both graduated from the same university. And when you start digging deeper into what they've done, their careers are very different. So each case has to be a master's dissertation about a product, and we need immigration to buy that product. Nothing in that master's dissertation can stray from the truth, but it needs to be told in a way that's compelling, because you are trying to convince. Our job as attorneys is convincing.
Thank you. Are there like certain professionals or professions that it's easier for them to obtain the waivers than others?
This is a very interesting question, because I do not believe there are certain professions that are better than others. So we've gotten national interest waivers for marketing professionals, accountants, teachers. I think Adriana did one for an artist, educators, trainers. But there is, in my opinion, a certain interest in STEM fields. So there's nothing that says on paper that it's better to be in STEM fields than non-STEM fields. But the policy manual, the USCIS immigration policy manual, has certain specific considerations for STEM workers that do lead us to believe that, it's a bit easier to find evidence for STEM fields, right? So it's going to be easier to find documents from the Department of Energy, from the Department of Homeland Security, saying that getting data scientists to come to the United States is important than it is going to be finding documents saying that someone doing self-esteem improvement for dance is in the national interest. It's going to be a bit hard. It doesn't mean it's impossible. We've done it, but STEM fields are easier to find evidence. So STEM is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics.
Thank you. Can an athlete qualify for national interest waiver?
I don't think, well, I'd have to look at the case. I'd have to look at the case, but if you're a professional athlete, you just go the EB-1 route, right? If you are a professional athlete. If you are an athlete and you are a coach, then maybe there could be an argument, but we'd have to narrow those arguments down as much as possible, because there have been a lot of cases about teachers and a lot of footnotes in cases, and NYS the 1998 decision has one footnote talking specifically about classroom teachers. So when you're trying to prove national importance of your proposed endeavor, it's going to be very hard for someone teaching at a certain school or a certain dojo, let's say, or a certain football school to say that this is national importance. So it would have to be, a very solid plan onto what your proposed endeavor is, because it's not only about what you're doing and what you've done in the past, but what you want to do. So let's say an athlete who's a coach, who's been coaching kickboxing, right? And then so his argument would probably not be, I want to coach kickboxing, this is national importance. It would probably be, I want to teach self-defense for women, and I am going to participate in conferences nationally speaking about this, right? Each case is very particular. So I wouldn't say that it's entirely out of the question for an athlete, but it would require a very particular approach.
Thank you. Is the process different for applicants who are in the United States and those who are applying from outside?
Yes. Yes. Because when you're applying in the United States, you do something called an adjustment of status, where you file Form I-485, I-131, and I-765 for work permit. And usually you can only file adjustment of status if you have valid legal status in the United States. If you are abroad, and you can file your EB-2 National Interest Waiver concurrently with your adjustment of status. So you get a work permit in 5-6 months. Right now, 5-6 months, it used to be 90 days. And you can start, let's say you're sponsored by Apple. Apple sponsored your visa and you have a pending national interest waiver with a work permit, and then Microsoft wants to hire you, then you can switch jobs and leave that sponsored visa. If you are abroad, you need to wait for the national interest waiver to be approved and then go to consular processing at the embassy. You get a stamp on your passport that's valid for 6 months. And as soon as you come in, you get that stamp on the passport is like a temporary 1-year green card. You pay your immigrant visa fee and they start processing your green card. So that's the difference, basically. Either going to the embassy or doing it in country.
Thank you. And how do you balance working locally in Texas and also dealing with people who live abroad and balancing those time zones?
Good scheduler. Yeah, we have a lot of clients in the Middle East, so we usually have to take those meetings very early in the morning, and we try to keep our communicate. One of the most important things for these things, and as immigrants, we understand that any immigrant, they can feel great, and we try to give them all the confidence they can have on our processes, on how we are providing a service. But these processes cause a certain degree of anxiety, right? So we need to have, the way we deal with all these different time zones is, having to, trying to keep the communication lines always open, trying to, let them know we're here, even if you're awake and we're sleeping, we're here. We're here for you. We're going to answer those emails as quickly as possible. This is a service, right? Service trumps outcome.
Do you sometimes have to take meetings at night?
I do, but not generally, right? I try to take them more early in the morning than at night. A lot of our clients naturally are in the same time zone as us, because we have a lot of clients from South America. But then we also have a lot of clients in Nigeria, the Middle East, where there's oil, right? A lot of our clients are in oil and gas. So Malaysia, dealing with the different time zones as far as scheduling meetings is always a bit hard. But it's only an 8-hour difference, unless you're in the Middle East, where we do have to wake up pretty early in the morning to take those meetings.
Thank you. And when you're trying to help clients build a case, do you need original paperwork, or can they send you copies by email?
Usually copies are enough, Emmanuel, right? So for immigration purposes, everything can be a copy. Nothing has to be with an apostille, right? So usually, everything is a copy, unless Immigration Services asks for originals. I have actually had once a USCIS officer ask for every single reference letter signed originally. And I think what happened is this person had a lot of reference letters from heavyweights, and maybe the officer was like, this can't be true. It was true. It was true. So we got all those letters signed originally, but it is odd for them to ask for original documents for national interest waiver purposes, at least.
Thank you. Yeah, what advice will we have for qualified professionals who are currently outside the U.S. and planning to come to the U.S.?
Well, my advice is always, reach out to an immigration attorney, and ask questions. Always try to look for more than one opinion. This is much like medical field. You need to look for more than one opinion. Sometimes, maybe I don't think of something during our meeting, and then maybe you can think of something, or someone else can think of something during the meeting. It's very important for people who want to work here and live here to understand that there are ways to come here legally, and that, if you can prove your value to the United States, this is a door that a lot of people don't like to knock, the National Interest Waiver door, but it's a good door. It's a good door. I was listening to the radio this morning, we've got a 3.7 unemployment rate, went up 0.2 points. And every week you hear about how companies are having trouble filling positions for professionals. So what's a way in? National Interest Waiver.
Thank you. Because before we started the show, you were talking about some professionals that will try to come inside without going through the normal channel, like sneaking in through the border.
Yeah. And this is frustrating, Emmanuel, because I saw, a medical doctor and an attorney from Venezuela with a newborn almost died in the desert, right? Like them, so many others, right? I can understand the desperation of having to leave for your family and fearing for your life. But there are better ways, right? If you have a degree, if you have experience, if you have dedicated the past years of your life to improving some systems, some engineering work, some educational process, there is a way for you to do this. And if there isn't a way right now, we can help you build a case so that you can apply in the future, so that you can build that. And one of the things, a lot of people will come in and ask for asylum and they don't realize they can't go back to their home country. They won't be able to travel. Asylums are taking about 7 years. So why wait 7 years when you can have probably a decision in about a year and a half, and get your green card, come in through the big door, right? Everyone should aspire to come in through the big door, and this is what the National Interest Waiver does.
Thank you. Can their families and children also benefit from it?
It covers the whole family. So it covers your wife. All the employment-based categories cover your family and children under 21. And if you have children that are over 21, then you just family petition for them. It's a bit longer wait, right? But still possible.
Thank you. You have a young family and you're also building a practice. You're also dealing with people from, everywhere, Venezuela, North America, Canada, Africa. How do you balance the rigors of all, lifting all these burdens for people and taking care of your young family?
Well, I've recently learned that I've set up certain non-negotiables, right? For time with my family, time with my wife, but I also have the benefit of a very supportive family, very supportive team in my work, and a very supportive wife who understands that, we're trying to build a practice. We're trying to work a lot harder than everybody else so that we can work like everyone else at a certain point. I don't know if I'm coming through that, but right now we are obsessed with our business, right? And it might be really just an ego trip of how great it feels to tell someone, here's your green card, right? That is just such a wonderful feeling, right? You've changed a family's life, and you can see them. Sometimes I'll FaceTime them, and they can't speak. You'll see their faces change, and it's just so valuable. And our clients, they're not fighting for money. They're not fighting the only thing they're fighting for is the ability to work and live in the United States, something that so many people take for granted. We are lucky. We are so lucky that we get to live and work here. And so as far as balance goes, it's a work in, I'm a work in progress. I've also understood with age that you need sleep. so trying to get a bit of better sleep in, but really I'm lucky to have a very supportive family into what we do. And 3 kids, still very young, not a lot of soccer practices and that sort of thing yet. So hopefully when that comes around, I'll have the time to spend more time with them.
That's awesome. You're helping people to aspire towards the American dream. You're helping people to go for their dreams. You're helping people to get opportunities in the United States, because this is one country that offers opportunities to everyone, regardless of your background or where you come from, as long as you can prove your value or your worth, and you're willing to work towards attaining the American dream. Thank you for what you do.
That's what we try to do. Thank you so much for having us here, Emmanuel. We're lucky to have gotten to know you and all you've done. You are really, truly an extraordinary individual, and your story is just so compelling. You're another immigrant story of what can be achieved in the United States when someone sets their mind to something. So, congratulations to you, man. You're really an example to all of us.
Thank you. And I appreciate your time today educating the audience on National Interest Waiver, and also telling us more about you and BBA Law Group. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Likewise, Emmanuel. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you.